live.
Yes, is your live.
Oh, that's pretty.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
At this time at 6:03, I would call to order the February 18th meeting of the Columbia Borough Planning Commission workshop session. Could I have a roll call, please?
Chairperson Wickenheiser.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Lynn.
Present.
Tiffany
Present.
Lynn. Secretary Lynn.
Here.
Member Evans.
Here.
Member Hartman.
Here.
Member Roach.
Here.
Member Leclerc.
Here.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I would ask for a motion regarding the minutes of the January 21st meeting as presented in your packet.
I'll make a motion that we accept those, the minutes as presented, please.
Okay, I have a motion from Tiffany. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Justin. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. I know after our last meeting, I had sent some emails around regarding the McGinnis text amendments and tables, that I wanted to delay this. It seems, however, we are getting direction from council that they want us to move forward with this. At their meeting last Tuesday, which would have been the 11th, they actually sat and went through the table of permitted uses for the light business. And what you have in your packet highlighted under light business are the changes that they feel need to be made to these uses. And if you'll kind of humor me here, I went through to see what the previous, what they are in the current table. And starting with the campground, that was a special exception. The car wash was a special exception. The communication tower was a no. The funeral home was permitted. The golf course was permitted. The picnic grove private was permitted. The outdoor recreation was permitted. The tavern, which may include a state licensed microbrewery, was a special exception. The building supplies and building materials wholesale sales of was a no. The cement, gypsum, concrete, or plaster products was a no. The chemical products that are not highly hazardous or toxic was a no. The large solar energy production facilities was a no. The transportation equipment was a no. Package delivery services distribution center was a no. Recycling collection center was a special exception. Self-storage development was a no. Warehousing was a no. Welding was a no. College or university, community center, cultural center, daycare center, adult daycare center, child, hospital, they were all permitted under the previous, as were the nursing home or personal care home, the place of worship, the school, public or private, primary or secondary. Those which are all no under there now were previously permitted. Government facilities other than uses separately were a special exception. Emergency services station, which may include a supporting social club building or facility, was permitted. Publicly owned recreation was permitted. Swimming pool, non-household was permitted. U.S. Postal Service was permitted. Under accessory uses, all of those that are highlighted as no were permitted, with the exception they were all permitted. Under the miscellaneous uses, the raising of livestock was a special exception, and crop farming was permitted. And thank heavens crop farming was permitted, or else the borough wouldn't have made any money off of that property out there all these years. Okay,
So where did the highlighted changes come from?
they came from the
Council.
Borough Council
Okay,
meeting
great.
on the 11th.
All right.
We said we wanted guidance from them, and at the top of that document, you'll see it says, these are notes from council.
Oh, right.
So everything that was changed is highlighted in yellow. So that's where that came from. And I did not attend the meeting because I thought this was going to be done in the council's workshop session. It wasn't, and then all of a sudden it's on a regular meeting. And I had other things going that night, so I did not make it that night. But I did go back, and there was some very good discussion. I went back and reviewed it. And I was curious on all of these institutional uses. Council felt that permitting any of them would detract from the tax base of the borough. That most of these would tend to be nonprofits,
Right. Not necessarily.
and that was the reason for making them not permitted, as were the government facilities, emergency services. That was some of the reasoning for those under accessory use and institutional, public, semi-public uses, for changing them all to not permitted. So they've given us some guidance here. I think one of the things with the special exceptions is that you have to clarify what they will qualify under the special exception. How does that work, Justin? Do you
Well,
need to,
there's general criteria for special exception.
right,
Which generally talks about whether they're creating kind of hazardous risk or nuisance to adjoining properties. Usually that comes when there's like businesses going in and there's residents around, which is a lot of the borough, right?
right,
So they have to show, traffic, noise, those sorts of things to the zoning hearing board to say that it's not going to be like a really incompatible use. So it's a use that's permitted by the ZHB, not the zoning office.
okay.
But sometime, or in the ordinance, you can have specific use criteria specific to the use itself. So if you say it's subject to additional criteria in there, so if it's like non-hazardous chemicals or whatever, are there going to be greater setbacks from a residential area just because of the nature of what they're working with? So there's two different ways.
Mhm.
One is always there, it's the general criteria, and then sometimes you can have specific to the use.
But anything that's classified SE would end up before the zoning hearing board
Yes.
for them to determine. Some of the notes here that are on this communication from council, they would like to see a condition: heavy trucks must exit to the south onto 441 and limit hours of operations to between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. I don't see how,
So that's specific to
Setting.
warehousing and distribution. though.
right,
So you could have those as specific criteria for that.
Maybe you can set times.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I
don't
don't
know
think
if
you
you
can
can
set
either.
times.
I don't think you can.
I can put down just
Yeah.
Well, it's what was forwarded to us, that's on
I
there
see.
as part
Still
of
at
the
the top.
notes. And,
But in terms of like the traffic
right,
routing, that's reasonable.
we would like to add a use of data center and have that permitted in the LB district. I'm gonna throw this out to you. Some of the thoughts I've had on this whole McGinnis thing is if we're making changes out there, I think we need to look first at the perimeter of that property. And what kind of setbacks do we want there? What kind of light pollution, I'll call
Yeah.
it? You know, what kind of buffering
And
do you
noise pollution.
want where it's closer to residential properties? Here this week, there was a document received from West Hempfield, and you did give it to me. And what they are doing is changing some of their setbacks. It wasn't included in our packet, but it had to do with the change in their setback between industrial and residential properties. And another thing I found, and I'd like us to look at it before we make a lot of changes, in going through, when I was researching short-term rentals, I looked at Mountjoy Borough, I looked at Liddittsboro, and I looked at Ephrata. And one of the things I found in Mountjoy Borough was they have a classification called campus industrial. Campus industrial. It's like, it's an industrial area with different limitations, with different requirements that would fit more into an urban setting, an area surrounded by residential properties.
But more so on a campus.
Yeah,
That would be fun.
you know, it,
Like a business park.
like a business park. And there were different setbacks for that.
So it specifically addressed setbacks and screening
It-
because of
Right.
residential
Being
areas
that
around it.
close.
And in looking at their permitted uses, it fell in very closely with our light business, with what our table of light businesses was. I just thought it was something,
Mary, are we being asked to change the light business for the entire borough or just for the business park?
I think it is the only.
it is the only, the airport is the only light
That's
business.
described as light business. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh.
Yeah. And here Mountjoy, just let me, campus industrial district to provide for light industrial, office, and related commercial development in an attractive, well-planned, campus-like setting, to carefully control the types of industrial options, to avoid nuisances such as excessive noise and hazards, to avoid residential uses that would conflict with existing industries, and to encourage coordinated development, particularly in regard to traffic access. Now, in Mountjoy Borough, reading through here, their issue with traffic access is off of 230, off of Route 230.
Right.
That's where they see their issue with. So there is an entire separate section of their zoning ordinance, additional requirements for the CI district. Minimum lot area 2 acres, except that a minimum lot area of 1 acre shall be permitted if other requirements are met. Setbacks, front yard 40 feet, 60 feet adjacent to an arterial street, The thing is, what I'm seeing is, at this point, the only streets that are going to be out there, and correct me, Eric, is the extension of Franklin Street coming off of 9th and 11th coming down from Manor. Is that
That is proposed, yes.
right? But there aren't any, like, Franklin's not coming in from the east. It's only coming in from 9th Street. It's not coming in from 12th.
I believe you're correct.
You know, so some of these things, side yard requirements, rear yard requirements, the size of your pervious, impervious. Now, this gets into, are we doing, Eric, are we doing the stormwater out there? Or is that going to be on a developer to do? Or don't you know at this time?
I don't know, I don't think we're that far into it.
Okay, because this even gets into the stormwater requirements.
I would think each individual business would have to do their own stormwater depending on how much they use for
lot size.
the building coverage, the parking.
Right.
Well, to some
What's
extent,
pervious and impervious?
yet there is proposed stormwater management area
Right,
already outlined here.
right. We would have to put in the
streets.
stormwater piping to go to the inlets and wherever it goes after that. And the same with this. I'm assuming the sanitary sewers are that we're gonna handle that as well.
So that's what we have to decide. Council has to decide how far into this project we want to go.
Right.
It could be anything from selling it tomorrow to remediating and selling it to adding streets, utilities and selling it. Streets and utilities is far we'll go. Oh, one step further, sell it as a full unit or sell it as partial. So those things we have to decide first. Like, I would say, work backwards. Do we want to sell partials or do we want to sell a full lot? And then do we want to put streets in or don't, and utilities or don't? And just work back out what we can say. But as of right now, council has to decide exactly how far they want to go. We know we have suitors, so how much do we want to? Every step we go, we raise the value of it.
What was tied into the grant? What has to be done by the borough?
For the grant, nothing.
Because I thought you said last month.
I mean,
There was a
money-
certain amount.
The money has to go to that.
Oh.
Can't go anywhere else.
To the
Right.
infrastructure,
Two units.
yes.
But if we sell it tomorrow, we spend $1 million, we just pay it back.
So there's interest for parcels or for the whole thing, to develop the whole thing?
Have to look at everything.
Okay. Gotcha.
And
That's tough.
there's probably one or two people
Tough
that
call.
know all who are interested. I don't, and most of the council doesn't know who the suitors are, who the select people are.
Understood.
And see, that's what makes it difficult for us here.
Yeah.
Makes it very difficult.
It makes it
yeah.
very difficult to know what direction to go.
So our goal on council was to say, we want to allow whatever can generate the most tax base for us.
Right.
The next thing is, we didn't want to take like zoning into it because setbacks and stuff are already in our code.
So we don't need to mess with those, other than maybe just looking at making sure the residents have a buffer between them.
Right.
Council's probably sympathetic to that, right?
Yes, we
Yeah.
are, but we didn't get into that too much.
Yeah, understood,
We were looking at more of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
for the uses.
Yeah, you were just looking at the tables.
both.
Yeah.
The text will be needed for the, special exceptions.
Are we able to discuss the table?
Sure, we can discuss the tables. How do you feel about the changes that council is looking to make to the tables that they are
Well-
suggesting be made?
Two things that I question on, this is the fifth page. One, two, three. Yeah, the fifth page,
Okay, you can reference page
2.5,
225.
yeah. The cement, concrete or plaster products, and the chemical products that are not highly hazardous or toxic. To me, that we may want to make that a special exception and have a case-by-case visit, because it's kind of subjective to say not highly hazardous. I know there's a way to make that objective and concrete, but technically it's subjective. And if you're talking about the housing around there, there are products to me that you may not want near residential housing that could go into the atmosphere and pollute. And then back on 2.7, where no longer permitted are college or university educational support buildings, community center, library, and cultural center or museum. All of those are completely fitting with our Columbia 2040, especially the educational part, that we wanted to have more educational opportunities, especially for adults nearby. And so,
So you would want to see them still permitted?
yeah, I think, and especially in that area, that could be very fitting within a business park, to keep those permitted. And the last one is the publicly owned recreation. What, I just have a question with that, because I'm not sure really what they're trying to no longer permit. Do you know?
What was the,
So.
At the
back to
very bottom.
education. Well, let's go back to the chemicals.
Okay,
There's hazardous chemicals, and then there's chemicals.
right,
right,
Household chemicals are considered chemicals. So if a company does, if a laundry company comes in here, they have detergents, they're chemicals.
right.
Those are not hazardous chemicals. If somebody came in here with radioactive and tried to tell you it's not hazardous,
Obviously it is.
obviously it is. So, yeah, I mean,
I'm just thinking that you're going to have companies, I mean, we have companies locally that back up their pollution and say that it is not pollution and that it's well within what's legitimate. And yet technically, if you breathe the air, you know that it's not safe, and the neighbors that live nearby it know what it does to their property. So to me, it's a little bit subjective because of the word not highly
Not
hazardous.
highly,
I mean, it's either they're hazardous or they're not. So,
well, then you have to define hazard.
right. So that's why I'm
not
saying
saying that-
you may
I'm
want,
not saying
you may
that
want to
is-
change it to a special
but I'm not
exception.
I'm not saying that is, I'm saying the word hazard alone, you have to put definition behind it.
Right.
Is it a 1, 2?
That's
3,
what
4?
That's what I'm suggesting.
But I would change it to an SC.
Well, having both of them changed. So the chemical gypsum concrete plaster, the
Right.
zoning hearing for Living Stones was, and Mary, you were probably there that night, based right in, and in a residential area, there were a lot of questions about their operation.
Right.
And
And
I
it's a
walk that
beautiful
way, and Mary,
renovation.
you walk that way as
Mhm.
well. And there are times when, you know, there's the sidewalk and there's some stuff in the gutter and
Right.
it's
Yes.
kind of dusty in there. The chemical, making them both special exceptions would make that applicant come before the borough and tell exactly
Give-
what.
Give more
Right.
They are
information, more
doing.
details.
But with
prove.
that being said, going back to when JG Environmental was before the zoning hearing board, when they were questioning about